As I've started thinking about the last 5 days of this unconventional intensive treatment plan, provided I do end this video project at 30 days, it occurs to me there's a really big taboo I haven't touched on yet. It's a hard thing to talk about, it's a really scary thing to talk about, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Suicidality. Before I go any further, let me give two big caveats. First, I am not actively suicidal. I do not have a desire to end my life. I do not have a plan to end my life. Second, I'm going to give the same professional guidance you see with any of these types of talks or videos. If you or someone you know is struggling with mental health and may be considering ending a life, help is available. Call 988, the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, 24 hours a day. The reason I want to talk about this taboo subject is because it would be unusual for somebody with my level of depression, past, not current, to not have some level of suicidal ideation. Looking back, I can see just how severely depressed I've been off and on over the years. And, in my experience, people who hit that level of depression at least think about suicide at some point, or they think about just not being alive. I myself have never attempted suicide, but that's not to say I've always been fully attached to living. A client shared with me a post from 2019 entitled, "I'm not always very attached to being alive. Chronic passive suicidal ideation is like living in the ocean. Let's start talking about how to tread water." That article really resonated with specific times in my life where I wasn't wanting to die, but I surely wasn't wanting to live. This requires a third big clarification. As I've said before, I took nearly a month off of therapy work at the strong, let's call it urging, of my medical provider. He didn't bench me because I was in any way suicidal. He benched me because my depression and anxiety were significant enough to precipitate a physical, medical condition. He wanted me to take time to focus on my mental health in hopes of improving my physical health. That's why I stepped away from clinical care for nearly a month. Not because I was at risk of harming myself or being hospitalized to keep from harming myself. But that brings up a good point. Why did I even feel the need to give that explanation? Well, a reality we are facing now is that statistically, various healthcare workers make up 3 of the top 10 professions with the highest suicide rates. Therapists aren't in that group. Every day in this country, 132 people die by suicide that we know of, deaths that are clearly ruled as suicidal acts. That accounts for 0.01% of the US population. And I think we can all agree that no matter how small that number is mathematically, it's still way too high. Of the people who die by suicide, 5% of those are mental health professionals. Not a particularly high number, but when you think about the fact that mental health professionals make up 0.39% of our population, 5% of deaths by suicide does take on more meaning. And why don't we talk about it? And by that I mean, why don't we, the mental health professionals, talk about it? 2 reasons that I can think of. First, our professional egos get in the way. I've talked at length about why mental health professionals don't share their own struggles, and you can be damn sure ego is a factor. Second, we don't want to take any chance that somebody is going to make a determination that we are unfit to practice. When a therapist is actively suicidal, meaning more than just thinking about it, maybe they have an actual plan, well, they are unfit to practice, no doubt about it. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about times where people don't have a strong will to die, but can still entertain thoughts of not being here or not wanting to live. Happens to a lot of people, and therapists are no exception. At that point on the suicidality spectrum, is someone unfit to practice? I don't have an answer because that's going to be too case specific. I'll speak to my own experience. Even when I was not fully attached to being alive, I was still fully attached to keeping other people alive. I was still very much invested in doing my job and doing it well. And, as I've said before, I must have been doing it well because my business continued to grow year after year. That might not sound like a big deal, but In the case of my practice, it is a big deal because we don't take insurance. We don't have sliding scales or reduced fees. We charge what many people would think of as a lot of money for our work. And I don't believe for a minute people shell out that kind of money for therapy that doesn't work. And I don't believe for a minute they send other people to spend that kind of money for therapy that doesn't work. So if my business was growing, I was compartmentalizing really well to do my job well. But like I've said before, that shit can't last forever. At some point, you run out of compartments. You run out of the mental shelving to organize and store all those little boxes where emotions and thoughts and fears and whatnot are hidden away. So, as best as I can tell, even when I was in the midst of depressive episodes, I was still good at my job. And I have to acknowledge that some of those times did include not being fully attached to being alive. Basically, not being bothered by the notion that I could die at any time, and, well, I'd be okay with that. I know now that was not unique to me. I have known other mental health providers who found themselves in similar situations, and they continued to do their job well and focus on that thing in front of them because that thing, that part of their professional identity, was actually a protective factor. Those were very transient experiences for me. Most days I was engaged with the world and had some hope and goals for the future. But a lot of days, I was okay with the idea that I could get hit by a bus or struck by lightning or killed in a fiery crash or have a stroke that took me out. The day I realized I could no longer be comfortable with those thoughts being part of my existence was June 23rd of this year. I was at a conference in DC and scheduled to fly back that night. I had a life-changing event that transpired while I was out of town. The kind of thing that just shakes you to your core. I didn't know what was going to happen next. I had a fitful night of sleep after learning about this distressing event, and somehow in my sleep, I pulled a muscle in my chest. I woke up with chest pain. I was very sure it wasn't a cardiac event, but it hurt in a lot of ways they say are symptoms of cardiac events. And I'm nearly 50, and I'm overweight, and I have a bad diet, and I was really stressed and agitated. I called my doctor's office, and we talked through the symptoms, what I was experiencing. And he was quite sure it was a pulled muscle, which made perfect sense. But as I sat at the airport, my flight delayed multiple times, I had a lot of time to think about what was happening in my life. And really, I didn't think I wanted to go back home to deal with it at all. I was also having those chest pains, and even though I knew it wasn't cardiac, you still have those what-if thoughts in the back of your mind. I went to that place of seeing myself having a heart attack and dying on the plane, like something in a movie. And for the most part, I was really okay with that outcome. Until I thought of my kiddo. Until I thought about somebody explaining my death to an 11-year-old. Death that would hit him hard. Still, fear took over. That what-if mindset took over. And I wrote a note to him in my phone, just in case. Obviously, I made it through the flight just fine. I made it home. I faced the situation that ended up wreaking havoc on my life and ultimately very much exacerbated my existing depression and anxiety, which then did lead to a hypertensive crisis, and that is cardiac, and my medical leave, and my desire to do this project. But that night, that June 23rd flight back home, crying in my seat, thinking about somebody finding this note in my phone and reading it to my son, that hit me like the proverbial ton of bricks. That was the moment I knew I couldn't continue to have this lack of attachment to life. I had to do something different. And that different became this unconventional intensive treatment plan. Because despite all the things I was facing, every scary outcome I was staring down, I wanted to live. I'm the first to acknowledge we can't do anything for other people, and we can't change just for another person. You can't quit using drugs for your spouse. You can't quit self-harming for your parents. You can't address an eating disorder for your friends. You have to do it for yourself. But other things and events and experiences and spaces can be part of what motivates you to do something for yourself. I didn't start this journey for my son, or my boyfriend, or my best friends, or my family, or my clients. I started it for me because I wanted to do everything I could to get to a place of enjoying my happiest and healthiest life. And part of what motivated me was all those people because they are part of my happiest and healthiest life. I can't say for sure that I'll never have those feelings again. Medication is helping, self-care is helping, therapy work is helping, but that doesn't guarantee I'll never feel those feelings again. It does, however, reassure me that if I feel that way again, it won't be a forever thing. If I feel that way again, I have tools and resources and people to help me through. Not everyone can say that. Not everyone can say they will never have those feelings again, or that they don't even want to have those feelings again. I think there's a small segment of the population that will probably always have some level of chronic passive suicidal ideation because we don't have perfect treatments for all people yet. Some people try all the things, they really try all the things, and it still doesn't work. I thought that was going to be me, and I'm really fortunate to have found a treatment regimen that is working. I'm still not going to shout all this from the rooftops or make sure everybody I know from now through the end of my days knows I had this struggle. Yeah, it's kind of not a secret anymore. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with normalizing the reality that lots of people have some passing thoughts of suicide or self-harm or not wanting to live or not caring if they live. It happens way more than we talk about. And it happens to therapists way more than we talk about or acknowledge. That's not where I'm at right now. I'm in a good place, and I'm trying to remove this stigma of talking about these things. That's where I'm at today. I'll check in tomorrow.